And now more death and destruction in Yemen as Saudi Arabia continues to bomb its southern neighbor. In a fresh wave of attacks, Saudi warplanes target the district of Agir in Sada province, killing at least 18 people, including women and children. A number of medics also attended. The victims were killed in the airstrikes. Deaths bring to 20 number of people killed in airstrikes in Saturday alone. Nearly 14,000 people lost their lives since the start of the Saudi aggression against Yemen in March of 2015. And now we're joined out of Perth by Mimi Al-Laham, peace activist and commentator. Hello, Mimi. Thanks for joining us back on the program. Now, if weddings, funerals, UN shelters, schools weren't enough, we have medics that they're targeting, and 20 people, 18 people in a single day. Your thoughts, please.
Well, what's been happening in Yemen for the last 3 years has been a humanitarian disaster, and the UN has said it's one of the biggest man-made disasters. The bombing of Yemen by Saudi Arabia has been indiscriminate, relentless, and basically a war crime. But because of the hypocrisy of the Western international governments who are supporting the Saudi bombing, specifically the UK and the US, and their humanitarian organizations and NGOs which are controlled by these governments, the suffering of the Yemeni people hasn't been highlighted. The war on Yemen is basically a silent war. We don't hear about it in the Western media. We hardly hear about it from the West's NGOs. And if they do mention it, they mention it in a whisper rather than on a loudspeaker like they do with other conflicts. And the only conflicts that they would highlight or talk about mainly are the ones that the US would have like favorable results geopolitically. So they would talk more so about, for example, Russia's involvement in Syria than they would about Saudi Arabia's bombing of Yemen. And that Yemen sort of highlights this hypocrisy of the world, and it's best specifically of the Western world.
But why, Mimi? Why? How is it Riyadh? What does Riyadh do for Washington and London where it's able to do what it's doing and get away with it in Yemen?
Well, Yemen is near a very strategic position in the world map, which can result in a lot of trade ships passing through near Yemeni borders, and the Western powers really would prefer to keep Yemen under their control and as weak as possible and not to have any independence. And so the basically, ironically, while the US is constantly trying to create regime change in countries where there isn't any US hegemony, in Yemen in particular, when it was trying to reject US and through its proxy Saudi Arabia, when they were trying to reject US hegemony, that's when the US came to try to use Saudi Arabia to maintain the status quo and maintain the regime, and which is ironic since they claim to care so much about democracy and freedom in the world.
Not to mention human and children's rights. Thank you for joining us out of Perth.
Exactly.
That was a peace activist and commentator. They're joining us, Mimi Al-Laham.